Support for Audacious with Chion Wolf provided by a generous contribution from Suzanne Hopgood in memory of Frank Lord.
Hey, real quick before we jump into today's show, you may have heard that Congress defunded public media. Connecticut Public lost about 10% of its funding, which is a little more than $2 million. And it's a little too soon to know what the full impact of this will be, but we do know there will be changes in what you listen to and read and watch. And so whether you agree with Congress's decision or not doesn't really matter right now. What does matter is that you are here listening. And that tells me that you find something worthwhile about this show and maybe about public radio in general. So if that's true, please donate. Connecticut Public needs monthly donors to help replace what we've lost and protect what we all stand to lose. Congress made up its mind, and today it's time to make up yours. You can start a monthly donation that makes all the difference at ctpublic.org/donate. Thanks. Now let's hear this episode that you made happen. From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf, and if you're like me, you can clock this voice in an instant.
Snap judgment. Snap judgment. Storytelling with a B. Do not miss it.
It's funny to say that somebody needs no introduction and then they always get introduced, but hey, that's Glynn Washington. He's been the host of Snap Judgment since he created it back in 2010. It's a radio show that's part theater, part sermon, part late night campfire storytelling magic. Now, you might assume that Glynn got here in the usual way. Journalism degree, NPR internship, and, a lifelong plan to be on the mic. Really, a dream come true, right? But nah, that's not how his story goes. Before he became a master storyteller, radio host, and producer, Glynn grew up as a little black boy in a white supremacist doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. What does the world look like when you grow up in that kind of environment, and how would you ever leave it? And after hearing story after story about end times and guilt and submission and power, how would you ever come to grips with the enormous power of storytelling? I couldn't help but wonder if we were just chatting at a party and he dropped that little fact about how he grew up, how would he even start explaining it all?
Well, first of all, Chion, if I met you at a party, I'm not going to lead with, hey, guess what? I grew up in this crazy cult. But if a few drinks in, Chion, what was that cult about? Worldwide Church of God was about a lot of things, but most of it was about the end of days was coming and you had to be ready, and that we had the special key for unlocking all the books of the Bible that revealed the revelation. And if you were part of this group, you were special. You were chosen. You were given access to Hogwarts, and everybody else was a muggle.
Were you born into this cult? Did your parents bring you into it? How did this start?
Yeah, I was, I think, 1 year old or something like that when my parents joined.
What did they say about why they joined?
It's a really, really hard question for them to answer even now. It's maybe one of the fundamental questions of my life. What in the world were we doing there? Why was this Black family in a white supremacist end of days Jesus cult? Why?
What made it a white supremacist cult? And why were they allowing you to be in it?
Okay, so let's get into Worldwide Church of God theology. Well, maybe we should start with the founder. Founder was a guy, an old ad man by the name of Herbert W. Armstrong. He was old when I was a baby, so he was really, really old when I was growing up. And the white supremacist aspect is this. He himself claimed to have the bloodline of David and of Noah and of Adam running through his veins. Something about the House of Windsor, and that he himself and other white people were specifically chosen by God to be ascendant. and that the lost tribe of Israel was really the United States of America. But other people could maybe make it to the promised land if they had proximity to these white folks. And that's where we came in. We were part of the proximate chosen. So this is actually far older than my church. The idea, this is an old story. In the Bible, after the flood, after Noah's Ark, Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And one of those sons committed some sort of unspecified vile sexual crime to Noah right after the flood, after the celebration of the ark landing. And the story goes that that son was Ham. And Ham became the progenitor of all the black people. Shem, the good son, became the progenitor of all the white folks, and the Asian people come from Japheth. Now, of course, there's more than 3 people in the world. They don't really get into all that kind of thing, but that's a very, very old story. It's used, actually, you'll see it referred to in a lot of tracts justifying slavery, and that there is such a thing as the mark of Ham. The mark of Ham was considered by a lot of these groups to be the darkness of skin. And so that was very, very fundamental to the belief. Now, that wasn't what they led with. That wasn't the opening pitch. But when you got into it, you realized how fundamental that was to the core beliefs and how much it impacted everything.
When they would have a date that they would predict the world ending, before that date, what would be going on among the people, and how would you feel?
Well, the last date they had, I was very, very tiny. It was like 1974. And I don't really remember that, but it was more general after that. And at one point, I remember we have a big festival, basically our Christmas and our Easter and everything rolled up into one. And they started handing out this book. And in this book, they were talking about, the end times was near, that you had to be ready. And there was some illusion that we were going to, as a group, go to a place of safety while the rest of the world burned. And that wasn't going to be in some distant future. That was going to be pretty soon. They stopped calling the date specifically, but I do remember this quote. It said, "Brethren, if you think we're making it through the 1980s without seeing the return of the Lord Jesus Christ, well, you got another thing coming." So you don't know exactly when it's coming. Some people, though, they got to sleeping with their boots on, so they'd be ready to go. There's a real energy to that, especially the energy is this. The number of people, I mentioned, I think 144,000 people in the Bible and the Revelation are going to be taken to this place of safety. Well, there were over 300,000 people in our organization. So somebody wasn't going. That you could look to your left and look to your right, and somebody wasn't going to be there. Don't make it you. Got to get them tithes and offerings in. Got to get your life right. Get right with Jesus, because tomorrow is not promised. That in itself is its own energy. Who's going to be left? And I can't even emphasize this enough. This was not unique necessarily to our church. We had a special intensity of it. But there's lots of organizations. In fact, there was a book series, and I think they made a TV show about it called Left Behind. That whole way of thinking that the rapture is not, we didn't call it we had other names for things, but that's not fantasy, it's not distant future. It's going to happen in your lifetime, and you better be ready.
When I imagine what that might feel like, part of me feels like terrified and unsure, and maybe a little bit like in over my head, what am I doing here? And the other part of me might feel like, wow, this is exciting. Like, wow, I'm part of this group and I'm confident I'm going to make it, and everybody else is going to die, and that makes me feel elevated and special. What of those things did you feel in that context?
I feel all of them at the same time. I feel scared for people who don't understand the special truth I've been granted. I feel special because I have been given access. I feel angry at some of the things that I think that they're doing wrong, especially around race. And yes, I feel that there's this urgency about my own personal life and about the world itself. The kind of the innovation, maybe to some degree, that the founder, Herbert W. Armstrong, did was he tried to tie current events to biblical prophecy. So if there was a war going on somewhere, he would open the Bible and say, this is the war that was mentioned. So you felt like the scriptures came alive in a different way because you were essentially reading current events in old scriptures. That took some doing from maybe a theological and storytelling perspective. And again, I'm a kid. And so I'm not questioning this world. I'm just trying to navigate the world. And I'm navigating a world of monsters. There's a beast power on the loose about to attack the world. Demons are real. Angels are out there. There are those who have been possessed. Some people have the power to heal. This is all real. And I want to be a good person, of course, and do these things, but I also want, there's an idea that in the final days, 2 witnesses will preach into the world. One of them was going to be, of course, our leader, Herbert W. Armstrong, but he was old. He's an old dude. I'm figuring they might have a little extra room to have one more witness be out there preaching at the end of days. And I thought maybe, I could work up and hit that level if I did right. That's what's kind of going on in the back of my head. But it was a lot. And because that's the thing, when I say a lot of people have a lot of beliefs, and you don't necessarily say, okay, you're in a cult until you cross a threshold. And the threshold is essentially you are spending all of your time in that organization. Generally, there's a single leader who has ultimate authority, and your world is somewhat removed when they try to cut you off from your family, your friends, and your community. And that's really what happens whenever we're in a compound situation. But if you have to meet 4 or 5 times a week, you might as well be in a compound. Even though, I went to a public school, and I was, of course, the weird kid at the public school because if you asked me some questions, I might just answer you, and people didn't understand what I was talking about.
So you were surrounded by a lot of inputs, by a lot of threat, by a lot of promise, by a lot of power, a lot of insecurity. How did you go from being inside all of that to, in your late teens, walking away?
Like so many other stories, it has to do with the girl.
It always does. That was Glynn Washington. You know him as the host of Snap Judgment. When we get back, what else was going through Glenn's mind when he chose to leave the cult?
I knew intellectually that this was the right thing to do, that we're doing the right thing. This is cool. But yeah, I felt like, is the sky going to fall? Is the earth going to quake? What's going to happen here?
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me. This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf, back with my conversation with Glynn Washington. You know him as the host of Snap Judgment, a storytelling show that's heard all around the country on public radio stations and all around the world as a podcast. But before all that, before the stage, the mic, the storytelling with a beat, and the millions of listeners, Glynn was just a little black kid growing up in a cult. A cult that preached white supremacy, the fast approaching end of the world, and a tangled theology that blurred fear with faith, control, and salvation. When we left off, Glynn was about to tell us more about his inspiration for leaving the worldwide Church of God.
Our organization had a lot of wacky beliefs, but one of them was a strict forbidding of interracial marriage, interracial dating of interracial relationships, which was cool. I thought that's great, but there weren't any in my area, really. Zero. And so you start to question, is this really what it says? And then start realizing it's not just this that seems to be weird. It's some other things too, because in a lot of ways they created their seeds of their own demise because they told us to study the Bible. They told us every word of it is a revelation. And most people who are coming into it, they're coming into it as grown adults. As a kid, we had all these Bible contests and Bible bowl, Bible baseball, all these things where we had to memorize the Bible. Memorize it in a way that I think only a kid can do. And so later on, when they're saying like, oh, because this and that is in the Bible, we were kind of, nah, I don't think so. Not in the one that y'all made us read, at least. Y'all might have some special Bible somewhere, but not the one that we had to literally memorize. And so that started it. And because like I said, they didn't lead with the racial stuff until it got to like in terms of intimacy and dating and stuff of this stuff. And then you're like, a Ham is what now? The curse? I got the curse of Ham? I don't think so. I don't think my skin tone is a curse. I think y'all can kiss my, no. I think that y'all gonna have to point this out to me a little bit more clearly in this book that you made me read. And that was really it. It was as a young man, when you discover that you're not going to be allowed to date, to go out with anyone under any circumstance in your neighborhood, in your area, in anywhere, then you get all of a sudden, your Bible scholarship might have to rise to a high level to try and find a way out of this dilemma that you seem to have found yourself in. And so that was the impetus. And so once they opened that door, it wasn't just that I had ended up having problems with.
When you left, how did you feel? Was it total confidence? This is the right decision. Nothing bad is going to happen to me. Or were you full of fear or something else, a combination of all of it?
I knew intellectually that this was the right thing to do, that we're doing the right thing. This is cool. But yeah, I felt like, is the sky going to fall? Is the earth going to quake? What's going to happen here? And I got lucky. I got very, very lucky. And that I eventually moved to Asia and got to clear my mind because they didn't even have a framework for what I was talking about. So, and trying to explain your belief system in a language you don't understand ends up being a very, very good tonic for clearing your head.
When you were in Asia, did you try on any other belief systems? I mean, they got plenty over there.
I'm kind of believed out. I actually lived in a Buddhist monastery for some time. I found that they didn't really ask me to believe anything, which I appreciate, which I still appreciate.
It sounds as though I don't know if whiplash is the right word, but going from this cult that you were in, which had fundamental beliefs and also sort of beliefs that were movable, especially in terms of when these end times were, threats and also promises. And then you go to Asia and everything sort of opens up and lifts, and it's a whole different kind of experience being a human being in the world. And I can't help but think that has to inform what you do today. And so I'd love to skip forward to 2008, when there was the public radio talent quest contest, where, quote, anybody could submit a 2-minute audio entry that demonstrated hostiness to NPR.
Right.
You beat out over 1,400 entrants to win that contest, and you instantly became the storyteller to watch. First of all, how did you decide to apply? And then once you got that gig, once you won, how that shifted maybe your confidence and your relationship with storytelling.
This is before the iPhone came out. And so everyone had iPods that you listened to. I was an early enthusiast of iPods because it's where kind of the crazy media was migrating to these devices. It used to be like you'd have, if you were lucky, you had some sort of hyper local station with Crazy Bob in the morning or something like that, or maybe a pirate radio station that might go out that you could listen to when people were experimenting on. And so all of that stuff was migrating to these devices. And, everybody who was insane was making their own thing. And one of those shows, they were talking about this contest that NPR was doing. And that's the way they put it. It didn't turn out to be NPR, but it was NPR affiliated. And so then I hear some of my heroes. It was Terry Gross, it was Ira Glass. They were talking about this thing. And I checked the date, and the due date was the next day. And so it wasn't a whole lot of thought. My baby girl came down the stairs. She was not supposed to be awake. And I told her, I said, sit down. And I told her and recorded a very inappropriate story and put her back to sleep and put some music under it. This is on GarageBand. And I sent it and I forgot about it. It wasn't like, should I, shouldn't I? I was throwing darts at the board. I was applying for a lot of different things. I applied for screenwriting fellowships, for music creation stuff, just all sorts of different things I was doing because I have a legal background. I was running nonprofits and I felt like I needed to do something different. I felt I needed to scratch a different type of itch. And when they called and said I was one of the finalists, I'm sitting there, I'm stunned. I'm like, well, I honestly wasn't stunned. I was disbelieving. I thought it was a joke. And I hung up the phone because I thought my buddy Mark was playing a joke on me. But when they called back and they confirmed everything, the contest itself was interesting in that there was 10 people they chose around the country. And everybody was really, really talented, actually. Everyone was doing their thing. But one of the guys who I thought was one of the person to beat was this dude out of Jacksonville, Florida. And every week you have to make a piece of some sort of thing. And then they would kick someone off the virtual island. And the dude that kept on knocking me on my socks, but his stuff, this dude out of Jacksonville. And then, that was good. Let's hit him with this. And that's next week he come back and said, man, good Lord. And at the end of it, they decided to award us both the prize. And that guy was a guy by the name of Al Letson. And he started a show called State of the Reunion, and now he is the host of Reveal. Al now lives between here and in Oakland, California, actually in Alameda, California, and Jacksonville, and has since become, instead of my most feared competitor, one of my best friends. And he, too, at the time, was one of those people who was just applying for stuff. We'd applied for apparently several of the same types of situations, just kind of scattershot. Let's see how this goes. Because here's the goal. This was my goal. My goal was to pay the rent as an artist. That was it. Can I pay the rent as an artist? Can I do this and, feed my babies and this type of thing? Which is, in this country, as you know, a very, very high bar. That's a very, very, very high bar to have some semblance of middle class living as a creator of art, words, music. It's tough. So that was it. That was the whole thing. And so starting the show, the thing about the contest was there wasn't a prize. So at the end of it, we were winners. Hooray! But it took a while to be able to launch a show. And yeah, I think to get back to your question, storytelling. I've had a lifelong love of story. I know that growing up in an organization where the bond that held us in those seats every week, the bond that made us run around crazy, the bond that made us send up to 30% of our income into the organization itself. This is a narrative bond. This is a shared story. And I felt that personally, my family and that my community had been abused by story, had been abused by someone corrupting a genuine desire to be a good person, There was a stain at the very heart of every single thing that we did, that really, really good people were hurt. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, I had a lot of beliefs. One of them was that we didn't believe in doctors. And I've seen people I love die that might have lived with basic medical attention. You see the ripple impacts of that on a family, on a community, on a kid, when your father dies of a disease that might have been treated, or let's say not treated. Let's say not cured. Let's say extended a few years. That's huge. And that didn't happen because of our fervor over a madman's story. And I'll say this as well. I felt, when you ask, like, how did I feel coming out of the organization? More than scared of sort of divine retribution, I felt this cold fury, this rage at what had happened. I felt used, tricked, stupid. I felt anger at the adults that had led me into this organization. Now, I was a kid and I didn't have the culpability of choosing it for myself, but I was in my late teens when I actually left. And I regret every single day that I extended my own imprisonment. And that also felt like, what can I do? They've stolen so much of my youth, but the only thing I really know how to do is tell stories. Now, I don't want to be anybody's cult leader. I'm done with cults. What do I do? And having in a lot of ways, studied at the feet of masters. If Jesus does not return next week, brethren, it's because of your prayers and offerings have given this world more time. Your heartfelt worship and your dedication to this cause has expanded the mercy of the Lord to buy them more time. And brethren, that's why we need your dedication right now more than ever. Oh, you can get it coming and going. And that's what happened. And so I didn't want to do that. But that was my only skill. So what do? Try to use the power of narrative in a different way. Try to spin it in a different way. Try to use that. They gave you the One Ring, and the One Ring is tainted. Sauron controls that One Ring. How do you twist that so that you can do something good with it? And that was kind of it. And even now, I feel like story is both a blessing and a curse. You can change someone's world by telling them a story that hits them in the heart and the mind. You absolutely can. Sometimes you change it for the better, and sometimes you change it for the worse. What we're trying to do at Snap, what I wanted to do was, more than anything, I do believe it is a type of magic. It's really the only way we get inside someone else's head. I was watching the old Crossfire show. You see this, and you see these guys screaming and hollering at each other, to jack, whatever, yelling. And never in history has anyone ever on either side changed their mind even a little bit from watching that show. You harden your positions. And the magic of story is that when someone said, look at here, I don't know about this and that, but here's what happened to me. There's something about it, maybe something about us, that puts our psychic guard down and lets ourselves, for a moment, put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And, really good storytellers, you feel it. You wait, you lean in. What happened next? And that what happened next, look, there is something fundamental to us. Maybe it's the thing that is us. The first thing a little kid asks for besides food is a story. And sometimes they want a story before they want food. I know my kids did. They wanted stories. They wanted stories all the time. They wanted stories. If it is that hardwired into who we are, I think it makes some sense to take it seriously.
I can't help but think how, had you not grown up in a cult, you wouldn't be so caring or mindful about how you tell stories now. I mean, now you're in this position, not as a cult leader, but your show has been on since 2010. You are on 450 stations of NPR. You have 1.5 million monthly downloads. You are in a position of power in storytelling. And I can't help but think that had you not been raised in a cult, you wouldn't be so careful with or mindful about what stories can do.
There is no question that my background, like everyone else's background, shaped choices that happen later. I can rail against these people, and I still have that icy hot rage. But at the same time, I know they let me hone my natural inclination in a way that would never have happened otherwise. So I guess I owe the people who were my greatest tormentors.
That was Glynn Washington, host of Snap Judgment. After the break, Glynn shares more about his storytelling process and why he doesn't believe in tidy endings.
I don't want your mind to stop. I want you to keep thinking about this. I don't want to say this is what the story means, ever, because it's going to mean something different for you than it's going to mean for me.
I'm Chion Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay tuned. This is Audacious. I'm Chion Wolf with the final segment of my beautiful conversation with Glynn Washington. He's best known as the host of Snap Judgment, where he and his staff meticulously, doggedly, lovingly craft the most powerful, potent, and sometimes painful stories from around the world. Back to our conversation. In Snap Judgment, you tell a lot of your own stories, and I can't help but wonder how you keep track. And I want to offer this. I'm friends with this guy named Matthew Dix. He, as of today, has won 62 Moth Story Slams, 37 Moth Grand Slams. He has his own storytelling show called Speak Up, a book called Storyworthy. Like, he's storytelling dude. And his method of keeping track of the stories that he wants to tell is he has a spreadsheet, and every day something happens to everybody. And that's his advice to people is start this list because it's the small things that end up being the grandest stories. You don't need to have won a prize or accomplished some major feat. The greatest stories are in these tiny moments. And so he keeps track with this spreadsheet. So I would love to hear how, as you not only include other people in their stories, and you've got a great team of producers who helps you do that, but how you keep in mind what stories you want to tell or even keep track of them.
When I first started out Snap Judgment, I got some stories that have some crazy, ridiculous fact patterns. I like, oh, check this out. I was running from the Yakuza, the Mafia, in the middle of Osaka and had to dive into this ditch and go into this underground area where there was a bunch of homeless people that showed us around and this and that. This is a banger story. And it is. That's a good story. But number one, I have to make 70 episodes a year. I don't have 70 of those stories. And number two, it's amazing that the smaller stories end up being far more impactful if they're told properly. If I tell a story about my mother, you think about yours. It's the stories about the everyday and trying to find what is the magic here. Even in the most mundane, something happens almost every single time that's different than what you might have expected. And being able to recognize that and being able to call it what it is. It's wonder. It's magic. It happens all the time. And like I just told this story just a little while ago on Snap. I went to the farmer's market. I got me some noodles. I was eating them. I was sitting down. Went to a park. The park had a bunch of little kids, and I love little kids. And I'm watching these little kids. I'm eating my noodles. I'm having a great time. And I realize that the mommies are kind of moving the kids away from me. And I look at myself. I'm like, I got my weekend sweats on. I'm eating noodles in a park, looking at strange kids I don't know. Oh, I better get out of here. And I felt bad about it because I was like, there was a world, there was a time when you could just hang out without being looked upon as a threat. And later that day, I went to a school that my son was attending, and he attended an African-American culture school called Ilie Omide. And there they have this kind of idea that elders have a responsibility to the kids, and you're supposed to have a respect, right? And this is kind of odd in Oakland, this whole concept. And you are not just a dude, you are a baba. Baba is like an elder, an uncle, or something of that nature. And I was walking over there. I forget what I was there for. But this little girl, she said, "Baba, hurt my knee." And I didn't know this little girl, never seen her before in my life. But she felt with complete and utter certainty that she had the right to come up to me and tell me that she scraped her knee and I was going to do something about it and I was going to make it better. And of course she was correct. "How'd you hurt your knee, baby girl? Come here, let me put a Band-Aid on you. Well, you feel okay now?" "Yeah, but I'm hungry." "Well, then let's come get you a snack." And the gift was to me. The gift was I didn't feel like a monster anymore. That she felt like she could come to me and that she did, and I was able to be that person who I wanted to be in the park earlier. And that's such a small thing. A baby girl, 3, 4 years old, tells me her knees hurt. That's the story. That's the end. But it's magical.
Can I talk to you about your voice?
Sure.
I love your voice. And it's funny because you've had it your whole life. It's been the only voice you have. And we're only used to hearing it since 2010 or so. And so to us, you've always sounded this way. You've always had this expression that is one of a kind and a presence that is utterly yours. And you could say that for anybody's voice. But there's something about your voice that is so lovely and alluring and compelling. And I wonder, did you grow into this voice and the way that you can command it, the way you can use it in service to the story? Like, have you always had that command, or is that something you developed over the years?
One of the things that we wanted to do with Snap Judgment was to highlight the musicality of everyday conversations, of everyday speech. And I think that everyone has a different music to their own tonality. And mine is kind of a da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. When I look and I try to find what is the rhythm of my voice, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And just like with anything else, when I'm speaking on a radio, yeah, I want it to sound like I just woke up and started wandering into the microphone and just these words came out. No, I have had to go back and work and rework this stuff. And then like everything is supposed to be invisible, but make no mistake, any type of communication, any type of art, you got to dig deep. And most of the time it doesn't work. And maybe we are liars to give the impression that, a story told on Snap Judgment is just something that I just ripped out that morning. No, and when you hear something on Snap, people might have been interviewed for 9, 10 hours, re-interviewed. And then that interview has to be cut down into a 15-minute piece and other voices added, and then the music has to come on and have it sound like a seamless whole. I love it when someone says, I'm so glad I told a story that way. And I want to scream and laugh and say, you didn't. But I'm glad it captured what the story is that you wanted to convey. Every single thing is hard. And every single thing, one of the things that Ira Glass told me when I got to meet my hero finally, he said, every single thing wants to suck. Every single thing. And you have to try your best to mold and shape and twist and cajole it into not sucking. And one of the lies, I don't know how this came to be, especially associated with art and with writing and with music, is that you first have to get a muse. And then if you get the muse, then you can create. No, this is a lie from the depths of hell. It's horrible because it tricks people. A muse, what you got to do is you got to sit your behind there, down in that seat. And if a muse happens by, that's great. That's fantastic. But a muse is for amateurs. The people who make stuff all the time know that it's a function of time and energy. It's butt in seat and making it happen. And you talk about the musicality. I love that you noted the musicality, but it is a artifice to some degree. Just like you don't assume that a person who wrote a song thinks in terms of song, speaks in song, says song when they talk to their spouse over the dinner table. The same thing about story. I know I'm looking at every single syllable because there is both a performance aspect to it, and I want to be sure that if someone hears a story from me, there's so many different ways to take something. I want to be as sure as I can be that I'm leading them where I want them to go. The whole thing. Here's a story. This is the magic of story. The innovation of Snap. Here it is. So many storytelling shows, storytelling things like maybe The Moth. At the end of it, you'll hear someone say, and then I realized, and the moral is, and finally I figured out. You're not going to ever hear me say that, ever.
You're not going to wrap it up with a bow?
I'm not going to wrap this story up. I'm going to lead you to water. Because at that point is where the story becomes not just mine, but yours. Because we are all story machines. I was talking about earlier about the first thing a kid asks for is tell me a story. What we do for every single story we hear, why, how did it work? That's what we do. And if I wrap it up with the bow, your mind says, got it, and it stops. I don't want your mind to stop. I want you to keep thinking about this. I want it to feel narratively complete. I want you to have a sense of emotional satisfaction, but I don't want to say this is what the story means, ever, because it's going to mean something different for you than it's going to mean for me.
As we wrapped up our conversation, I wanted to ask Glynn a few questions that maybe had nothing to do with storytelling. Starting with, what totally random opinion is he willing to defend till the end of time? Doomsday or otherwise.
It's a personal echo of people trying to get me to eat in the morning. Eat this stuff in the morning. Eat just got the most important meal of the day. You got to eat the most important meal of the day. My hill that I'm going to die on is leave me alone. If I don't want to eat something in the morning, I'll be fine. I'm going to be all right. I'm not going to starve. And so, that I guess goes with breakfast food is whatever you eat for breakfast. It doesn't have to be cornflakes. It can be whatever. It can be last night's dinner. It can be whatever it is. We have to have these rituals about this is for breakfast, this is not for breakfast, and whatever. Leave people alone. I guess the second one on that is I am from Michigan, and we eat hot dogs, we eat sandwiches, we eat pastrami. Why is it when I go to New York or go to Chicago, everybody's got to have something to say about what I put on my hot dog or my sandwich. I put ketchup on it. That's my damn business. I like to put ketchup on my hot dog. No, I don't like mustard. I especially don't like that mustard. Let somebody have their own sandwich, let them have a hot dog, and let them eat what they want to eat for breakfast in the morning. That's the hill I want to die on.
Have you ever had a premonition or a dream or a spidey sense or a vision that came true?
I've had so many, I made a show about them called Spooked. Spooked is real life Twilight Zone. And one of my earliest stories ever was seeing this face looking down at me and my little brother. Not scary, just a face in the middle of the night looking down at us. And it looked kind of like us. And it goes away, fades away. Run downstairs, next day my mama's not there. My granny's there. Where mama at? She'll be back, baby. She'll be back. She's not back. She's not back. 2 days go by, she comes back and she's weeping. Don't know what's wrong, but find out later on that she says, I'm hiding behind the staircase that we had. Playing hide and go seek with my cousins, and I hear her tell my auntie that she lost the baby. And I want to tell her that I saw him and he's fine.
What do you make of that?
I have no idea. And I can tell this story. I don't want to tell anyone what to think about it because I don't know what to think about it. I don't know.
You're not going to put a bow on it.
I can't. I don't have one to put because at some degree, I like, no way. And I think about this. A story of this type is so common. It's so common. Everybody's got a story like that. Not that story, but they got a story.
What is something you've changed your mind about?
I thought that I knew how to raise a child. I thought I had the basic steps down. I thought I'd get it. And I have my baby girl. And she's a good girl. If you treat them, give them basic patterns early on, then they will follow that for the rest of the time. And I'm busy, I'm about to write my little book, but then I have my boy. And I realized that what works for one kid is not going to work for another. And I thought that you had so much control over how a kid evolves. But I've learned that, you want to give love and direction and caring and food and all kind of stuff. But once you hit those sort of basic needs, you're almost peripheral to the development of this kid. And you've got to work to try and figure out how to keep up. It's not you directing them, it's them directing you. And at least trying to figure out how do I meet them where they are? How do I do that? And it's so different for each kid. And so, yeah, I was completely wrong about the way that I thought I was going to be raising my children.
Will you tell me about a pinch me moment in your life when you looked around and you thought, oh my God, I never thought it could get this good?
My pinch me moment is with my kids. Tuck them in for night. And Daddy, tell us a story. I'm telling them a story. And I tell them a story. I was like, all right, okay, good night. I'm like, no, that was stupid. We didn't like that story. I was like, what kind of story you want? And they started saying characters that I've made up to them before. And they want this character. And they want to see him in the castle. And they want to bring this other character back. And then they want to know what happens when they meet. And this is not. So I was like, okay, let me think about that for a minute. And I started telling them a story in they're bunk beds, right? The older one was on the top, the younger one was on the bottom. And I'm telling the story, it's dark in there, and I see both of their heads kind of leaning down over the bed, looking at me, waiting for what's going to come out next, telling them the story. And at the end of it, and they're like, was that a good story? And they're like, yeah, Daddy, that was a good one. And that's a pinch me moment for me.
Glynn Washington, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you, Kyle. It was really, really fun talking to you.
Audacious is always lovingly produced by Jessica Severin DeMartinez, Meg Fitzgerald, and Robin Doyon Aitken at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, with help from our interns Coco Cooley and Isaac Moss. You can find all of our episodes at ctpublic.org/audacious or on your favorite podcast app. Stay in touch with me on the socials at Kyone Wolf, and you can always send an email, audacious@ctpublic.org. Peace.